It's my great pleasure and honor to welcome you to the hooding ceremony for the 2017 graduates of SSA. I'm really delighted to see so many SSA graduates, family, friends, and loved ones here to honor our graduates this morning. The hooding ceremony is one of several ceremonial and celebratory events that mark the completion of graduate studies, and it dates back to the earliest traditions of our first universities. The ceremony, whereby a member of SSA's faculty will place a hood over the graduating student, provides a tangible symbol of conferring upon and thereby passing on the learning and the accomplishment from teacher to student and now graduate. The ceremony emblematically marks a passage from student to graduate and to new professional social work colleague. Graduates, you might remember that when most of you arrived a short while ago at SSA's orientation, I welcomed you by noting that you were crossing an important threshold in your professional development by coming to SSA to begin your work as social workers in training. And at that time, I mentioned that it would only be a short but rather intense phase after which we would meet again to mark a next important threshold for you and passage now that you are graduating from SSA. And when I said that at the time, I didn't realize that I, too, in a way, would be going through a graduation, in a sense, from SSA along with you, forging forth to take up new professional challenges and responsibilities as I assume the deanship at the NYU Silver School of Social Work. Our shared transitions, of course, are different in some respects, but I can really feel in a more personal way some of the excitement, perhaps some sadness, perhaps some anxiety, a sense of accomplishment, and perhaps even some worries about the future that you might be going through in your own passage this morning. Drawing from some terms and concepts you might have learned in maybe 300 or 301 or some of your other classes, although our narratives might be different, and while my authentic empathy may not be finely attuned to your experience in the moment, nonetheless, we are going through a parallel process this morning. In your case, of course, this ceremony marks both an endpoint as well as a new beginning, a threshold moment where you're about to embark upon what we hope and expect will be a fulfilling, an exciting, and yes, a challenging career as a social worker. Each of you in your own way has drawn from your innate courage and strengths, and through your classroom studies and fieldwork experiences, dialogues with clients, faculty, and peers at SSA, you've fashioned your skills into your developing professional social work acumen. Along the way, we, your professors, colleagues, and supporters, have strived to equip you with some knowledge, perspectives, skills, and a way of professionally tapping, or what we like to say, use of yourself as a vehicle to promote change, to advance equity, to advance social justice, and to advance the compassionate treatment of others. Along the way, you've had many dedicated teachers who've worked to challenge you, and at times you've challenged us and taught us in response, bringing out and considering different perspectives, different viewpoints, challenging assumptions, and drawing on evidence and rigorous thinking to shape your professional acumen and developing skills. And here I would like to take a moment to make special mention of Professor Charles Payne, who is retiring from SSA this summer, and who I know has touched many of you through his prodigious gifts as a teacher and a scholar of social welfare, bringing new and critical perspectives to persistent problems like racism, social inequalities, and injustices. His scholarship has had major impact in understanding the challenges of urban school reform and the advance of civil rights. And I want to give special recognition this morning for his distinguished decade of service to SSA, to the Woodlawn community, the city of Chicago, and the field, as he too is going through his own graduation of sorts as he retires and transitions from the university to return to be closer to family. So can we just, thanks, Beth. Thank you. Along the way, it's instructors like Professor Payne, both in the classroom and in the field, who have encouraged you to be self-reflective about your work, to not merely act out of the firm certainty of your convictions or unexamined biases, but also to accompany with that a self-awareness, a balanced mix of commitment to the cause, with a humility that we're in this together, and that the world can be sometimes a rather complicated place. That self-reflectiveness gives us the opportunity to gain greater perspective, to add depth and sophistication, and thereby yield greater impact in our work, looking beyond the immediate and the apparent. And here I also want to give some special recognition and provide a moment in honor and memory of Jason McVicker, who, as you all know, I think, suddenly and sadly passed away earlier this year, and who was a deeply dedicated teacher to many of us in your clinical learning. Jason taught both humility and self-reflective rigor in our direct work with clients, and was a great teaching partner to me personally and to many others at SSA and in Chicago over many years, and we will miss him shortly. And I would just like to pause here for a moment of silence in Jason's memory. Thank you. Let me say that all of your teachers at SSA have worked with great devotion and helped you to develop a rigorous, critical, evidence-informed, and self-reflective acumen, ever striving for the highest levels of professionalism and integrity to deliver the most substantive and sustained service. So this is my 7th and final opportunity to preside as Dean at SSA's annual hooding ceremony. So now let me say something that I always feel, but I don't normally share forthrightly at hooding ceremonies. And don't let this go to your heads. And I really do say this with all true humility and with enormous pride, that all of you sitting here, I really feel that you're embarking on the hero's path, and that you're taking up the torch of addressing what appear to be insurmountable challenges and without expectation of great material reward. And you're doing so for our whole community. You're doing so for our whole society. But let me also say that you're joining this path with a community of like-minded, devoted, dedicated, talented social workers alongside you. This work cannot be done alone, and we're all in this together. Stay connected, support one another, connect with our wonderful alumni community, and those who are more seasoned heroes, if you will, and who will support you along the way. And stay connected to SSA as a school. Help SSA continue to become an even better place to take up the important work of the profession. At this moment, I also would like to make note that we are missing an important hero this morning, as you know. A beloved friend, a fellow learner, and a colleague to many of us at SSA. And of course, I'm speaking about J.C. Mingo, who sadly and unexpectedly passed away in March of this year. J.C. came to SSA wanting to combine his law background with social work so he could work on behalf of vulnerable communities. And I know from your expressions that he deeply touched so many in the community at SSA and in Chicago. Many of you have shared your memories of his spontaneity and his thoughtfulness, his kindness, and his deep empathy, mixed with his willingness to ask tough questions. And as field instructor Andrea Soprich put it, his passion for people and curiosity about social work was apparent from the first time I met JC. He was tender and gentle, often asking teammates how they felt and how their families were doing. He was inquisitive and bright, never shying from asking honest questions, prodding discourse about tough social topics. He was reflective and engaged, willing to be challenged, and striving to deepen his understanding of social needs and his role in developing solutions. JC's spirit and laughter were contagious. It was a privilege to work and learn from JC. We have most certainly lost a heroic member of our community, and on behalf of SSA, I would like to invite JC's mother, Janet Mingo, as well as other family and friends to come up to receive this year's first hood on JC's behalf and in his honor. Some passages are marked with sadness, and some are with joy. Some, like today's hooding ceremony, represent both endings and the excitement and possibility of new beginnings. And so let's celebrate today as a community, both at the ceremony and the reception following after. At this threshold for each and every one of you, let me wish you every success along the difficult path of heroes so that your work can better the lives of those most in need. My warmest congratulations to all of you. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce Assistant Professor Yanilda González, who will in a few moments deliver this morning's remarks as the 2017 winner of SSA's William Pollock Award for Excellence in Teaching. This award is named in honor of Professor Bill Pollock, who served on the SSA faculty for 26 years, from 1976 to 2002. A faculty committee reviews nominations and letters of support submitted by students and selects one faculty each member for this high honor at SSA. The honorees are chosen for their contributions to classroom teaching, their ability to inspire rigorous thinking, and their talent and skills in enriching the learning experiences of their students. Professor González joined SSA's faculty just this past academic year after completing her postdoctoral studies at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. She quickly dove right in at SSA and has played an instrumental role in teaching our core 300 course, Social Intervention Programs and Policies. She also taught a new, critically important and especially timely course at SSA, informed by her own scholarship on policing, citizenship, and inequality in comparative perspective. And it's worth noting that she recently organized 2 transnational events at SSA this year, one focusing on anti-immigrant policies, and another that brought together mothers from across 3 countries who shared experiences and strategies in the wake of losing children to institutional violence. Professor González's research focuses on the politics of police reform in emerging democracies of Latin America. As our students who enthusiastically nominated Professor González know, she carries with her a quiet gravitas, a wonderfully sharp mind, a graceful spirit, and a keen, deep sense and commitment to advancing social justice, both locally and globally. Would you please join me in welcoming Assistant Professor Yanilda González.
Could I just lower this a little bit for us shorter folks? Before I get started with my remarks, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that incredibly powerful moment where J.C. Mingo's family received his hood. As many of you know, and as Dean Guterman just mentioned, I recently organized an event about how grief and loss can be transformed into action and change and resistance. And so it was a very powerful experience here to just witness that. And I have no doubt that that's exactly what will come out of this moment of pain and grief and loss. With that acknowledgement, I wanted to thank Dean Guterman for that kind introduction. I want to extend a warm greetings to my fellow SSA colleagues, graduating students, and their family and friends. But first and foremost, please allow me to congratulate our graduating students for this incredible accomplishment. Having had the opportunity to get to know many of you over the past year, I feel incredibly encouraged and hopeful about what the struggle for social justice will look like in the coming years. It will be led by all of you in ways both big and small from your respective positions. So congratulations, and I hope you're feeling very proud of yourselves, because I'm incredibly proud of you. I'm trying to hold it together up here not to cry. I'm immensely honored and humbled to have been nominated by many of you, and to have been selected for the William Pollock Award for Excellence in Teaching at SSA. I share this award with some of my favorite teachers, many of whom are in this room, spoiler alert. As many of you know, this was my first year teaching at SSA, and to be honest, I had taught very little prior to coming here. 1 year ago, when I received my teaching assignments for the year and began to prepare my syllabi and course materials, I found the prospect of teaching all of you to be incredibly intimidating. I say this as someone whose very first teaching experience was co-teaching a human rights course for police officers in Jujuy, a small impoverished province in northern Argentina. Many of the students in that class were armed, and they were fairly hostile to the very notion of human rights, which is what I was there to teach. So I'm not going to lie, that was a pretty intimidating experience too. But 10 years later, when I found myself with the great fortune to be able to teach social work students, I was even more terrified than when I had to teach a room filled with human rights skeptics with guns. And this is because of the words of a social worker that is near and dear to my heart, my own sister, María González. When my sister was in her MSW program, she would complain nonstop about her policy classes, finding them to be boring, overly abstract, and irrelevant to the work she hoped to do as a social worker. This was many years ago. But when I reminded her of this after I got the job here, she tried to make her little sister feel better. But I was still terrified by the prospect that my own students would feel the same way that my sister did about the very types of classes that I, as a political scientist, would be teaching. I mean, seriously, think about it. How was I going to get students to engage with and see the relevance of Tilley's bellicist theory of state formation, or Holston and Caldeita's concept of disjunctive democracy? Or what about, you all know this one, Kingdom's theory of agenda setting? And oh my God, even I had trouble with this one, Lipsky's book on street-level bureaucracy, right? I mean, I know probably already put some of you to sleep with that. It's okay, I don't blame you, but I'm going to bring you back. So after fretting for this for several weeks last summer, I found comfort in the words of one of my favorite teachers, my father. And by the way, when my mother hears that, she's going to be pretty mad, because she was actually my first grade teacher back in the Dominican Republic. So I hope they can edit that part out of the video, right? Good. So my father was a teacher in the Dominican countryside for many years. But even after we moved to the United States, and he would go on to work, as many Dominican immigrants in New York City do, in a bodega for 16 hours a day. That's a convenience store for those of y'all not from New York. But even as he took on this new role, he still remained our teacher. To help teach us English before we formally started going to school here, Papi would tape pieces of paper on household items with their English names: door, table, television. That one was actually pretty easy because it's the same word in Spanish, but you get the point. But even after we started going to school, Papi continued to be our teacher. For example, after completing his 16-hour shifts in the bodega, Papi would translate my math word problems into Spanish long after I should have already been asleep. He would translate my math word problems so that I could finish my homework. So as you can see, when it comes to teaching, Papi is the real deal. With his solid street cred, Papi is always ready to offer unsolicited teaching advice to his daughters. Usually, this advice goes to my little sister, who's a third grade teacher in Brooklyn. But this time, it would be my turn. So last fall, the day before I started teaching my first class, Papi called me and said, Kiki, that's what he calls me. He said, Kiki, when you go in there tomorrow, you tell them that this is not going to be some hierarchical relationship where I'm the teacher and you're the students. We're all here to learn from each other. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. As a student of participatory democracy and a proponent of procedural justice, I was inspired by my father's proposal of co-production of knowledge. With this in mind, I want to share this award with my first and second year students. This teaching award belongs to all of us, because everything that happened in our classroom was collectively constructed by all of us. Just as my father predicted, we learned important lessons from one another over the course of my first year here, and I'd like to share some of those lessons with those of you who didn't have the opportunity to be part of our classroom. Among the many things that my students taught me and one another, I'd like to highlight the vision that my students, the vision of my students that allowed for seamless linkages between theory and practice. The courage with which they approach difficult subjects and conversations, the agency to challenge power relations and create change within the spaces that you inhabit, and the enduring commitment to community building, learning, and justice. As I went about my teaching my classes over the past year, I was continually impressed with the brilliance and vision of my students. Being at the University of Chicago, I knew y'all were going to be very intense and very smart, but what I was most taken by was the ability to connect abstract theories of politics and policy to urgent questions of basic rights and social justice. In my policing class, students seamlessly drew on Tilley's theory of the coercive and extractive functions of the state to understand the predatory and racist practices of Ferguson's government and police force against the city's largely poor and black residents. They also applied Holston and Caldeira's concept of disjunctive democracy to explain the plight of an asylum seeker from El Salvador who was fleeing both gangs and the police that one of my students worked with in an immigration detention center in Dilley, Texas. In my 300 class, my first-year students convincingly and enthusiastically drew on Kingdon's agenda-setting framework to advocate for reforms within their own agencies and even here within SSA. They even grappled with the notion of themselves as what Lipsky calls street-level bureaucrats and what this would mean for their ability to serve their clients in the current political climate. So even though I bet many of you were snoring when I mentioned these theories and concepts, if you had been in my class with my students, you would have gotten a sense for their vision for how these theories and concepts that may otherwise seem abstract and irrelevant, as they did to my sister, just kidding, actually can tell us a great deal about social justice and everyday social work practice. At this nexus between theory and practice, I would also come across a second essential lesson from my students, that of courage. While I was trained in a discipline that taught me how to study politics, structural violence, and injustice with great theoretical and methodological rigor, my discipline definitely did not prepare me to talk about these subjects in any meaningful sense, let alone facilitate fruitful discussions about them. But time and time again, my students approached difficult class discussions with singular courage, candor, and kindness. In my policing class, a student who initially thought she should stay far away from that class due to the sensitive nature of the material and her own relationship to it, nevertheless overcame this hesitation and became one of our most active and most insightful participants. In my first-year cohorts, my students had the courage to express and process their emotions after a devastating electoral outcome, in which everything they are fighting for was ultimately defeated. They also came to terms with the painful reality that the same inequalities and biases that have flourished in our society are often reproduced in our own classrooms. And they embarked upon the painful but necessary process of confronting those inequalities and biases in here in order to become better equipped for confronting those inequalities and biases out there. I can say unequivocally that I have never seen more skillful and more compassionate approaches to difficult conversations than what I observed among my students. Which brings me to the third key lesson that my students shared with me and one another: the importance of recognizing our own agency to create change and challenge power relations within the spaces that we inhabit. My students spoke up, challenged one another, and their professors, and the SSA administration, and they demanded true inclusion and diversity, real representation, and meaningful engagement with the egregious injustices happening beyond the privileged spaces of this university. These conversations certainly created discomfort for some, but they are moving us in the right direction, closer to our stated ideals. Having faced a very different experience in my own graduate program, I have been continually inspired by the ways in which you, as SSA students, recognize and exercise your agency to try to make this school into the type of place you hoped it would be when you arrived here. My hope is that you will take this same spirit of constructive resistance to the new spaces you'll inhabit once you leave us, and ensure that they too live up to their stated ideals. I feel pretty damn confident that you'll achieve this, pardon my language. I feel fairly confident that you will achieve this, and that's because of the commitment, passion, and follow-through that I've observed in my students. I could tell you a lot of different stories that illustrate the commitment and passion of SSA students, such as what I taught the first-year evening students, and we had a power outage halfway through our class in the middle of winter. The students didn't skip a beat. They turned on their flashlights and their smartphones, put on their coats, and kept the discussion going until the end of our class time, even though we had no light and no heat. That is commitment, my friends. But I truly learned about the level and commitment and engagement of SSA students from what the students in my policing class did after our class had formally ended. Long after they submitted their final papers and received their grades, many of my students came together to work on a memo of policy recommendations for reforming the police right here in Chicago. And they based these recommendations on their own research that they had done for our class. I even had the distinct privilege of seeing some of my former students lead a workshop on policing and police reform at a social justice summit for social work students at other universities. I could not have been prouder of those students and the model that, of all these students, and the model that they've provided for all of us for what engagement can look like. So as you leave this space, I hope you'll take with you the lessons that you've taught me and one another. The courage to be vulnerable, to make change and challenge power relations in the spaces we inhabit, and seeing through your passions and commitment. These lessons will be essential as we work to become good advocates for ourselves and our communities, as well as to empower others to become strong advocates for themselves. Thank you for the difference that you've made in my life, in one another's lives, in our classroom, and in this school. Congratulations for all that you have already accomplished, and I cannot wait to see what you'll do next. It has been an honor to have had you as my students, and a privilege to have had you as my teachers. Thank you.
You can see by your standing ovation what wonderful contributions Professor González provides for our students. I just want to congratulate you again on winning the William Pollock Award for Excellence in Teaching. Now I'd like to invite SSA Assistant Dean of Students Kristen Reid Salomon to the podium. who, along with SSA Alumni Association Secretary Loretta Maestranzi, who will present this year's Student Honor Awards.
Hello. Thank you, Dean Guterman. It is my distinct honor to recognize two graduating students who are the recipients of our Distinguished Student Awards for this academic year. SSA faculty and field instructors were invited to submit nominations for each award, and a committee of administrators and faculty made the final selections. Each student will receive a certificate and a monetary award. Thank you to SSA Alumni Association Board Member Loretta Maestranzi for assisting with the presentation of these awards, and Loretta will also be hooding each award recipient. The first award is the Sonia G. Burrs Honor Award, given to a graduating master's degree student for outstanding work with special consideration given to a promise of future achievement in the field of services to older adults. Marvin Burrs, an SSA graduate, initiated this award in 1977 in honor of his mother. This year's award goes to Therese Allen Nelson. Therese Nelson is a graduating student in our extended evening program with a clinical concentration, who has completed both the graduate program in health administration and policy, as well as the older adult program of study. During her former studies and experiences, Therese found herself constantly drawn to issues of healthcare and social justice, as she became aware that many disparities in health are based in social inequality. Therese has been able to learn from clients and mentors as she completed internships at Hines Veterans Administration, the Cook County Circuit Court, and UChicago Medicine, where she worked in the specialized oncology care and research in the elderly clinic. This is a unique program that assesses the health of older adults and recommends courses of treatment based on their health status and quality of life. Therese's nominator shared, "We know from feedback received by the doctors Therese worked with at UChicago Medicine that she made important and significant contributions to this program. Additionally, in the GFAP capstone, she worked on a team that explored financial toxicity, and Therese played an essential leadership role on that team. Therese is thoughtful, generous, a good communicator, and is sure to give more to the field of services to older adults." In her own words, Therese has followed a winding road to this moment of graduation from SSA. Before studying with us, Therese led an impressive career in information technology, earned 2 master's degrees, and completed a Fulbright scholarship in Helsinki. After graduating from SSA, Therese hopes to work in a place where her efforts can have the most impact for good on the lives of older adults and those with complex medical and social needs. Therese, please join us on the stage to be hooded and celebrated. Congratulations on receiving the Sonia Burrs Honor Award. You got it. The next award is the Salomon O. Lichter Memorial Prize, given to graduating master's degree students for scholarship and professional leadership. The family, friends, and colleagues of Salomon O. Lichter, who received his master's degree from SSA in 1941, established this memorial. Mr. Lichter worked for the Jasek Family and Community Services and later served as Executive Director of Scholarship and Guidance. He was known for his creative and innovative approach to social work practice and his love of teaching. This year's Salomon O. Lichter Memorial Prize goes to Nathan Andre Roeder. Nate Roeder is a graduating student concentrating in social administration who completed the International Social Welfare Program of Study. His second-year field placement was at the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, where he worked on building the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant Mental Health. During his time at SSA, he co-founded SSA Without Borders, a student organization whose mission is to promote international issues in social work and to provide academic support and a collective voice for international students at SSA. In his time with this organization, he has been inspired and humbled by the work of those around him and has contributed immensely to the collective leadership and impact of this group. This was echoed by his nominator, who said, Nate is a phenomenal student who has demonstrated great leadership. Nate is the co-founder of SSA Without Borders, a group that provides paper editing assistance to international students and other students for whom English is not their native language. But not only that, this team led a student service trip to Dilley, Texas over spring break, during which several SSA and UChicago students drove to Texas to volunteer in a detention facility at the border. Nate provided leadership for the group and helped raise money to fund the trip, recruited volunteers, planned and executed the service week, worked with faculty to develop preparation and debrief workshops, and finally, planned a panel presentation about the experience for the entire SSA community when they returned. This example of Nate's leadership capacity perfectly exemplifies the professional social worker he has worked to become. Nate will continue his leadership in his new role as the project manager of the Cara Pro Bono Project, where he will be organizing legal aid for women and children being held in immigration detention in Dilley, Texas. He has traversed 4 continents on his bicycle and has won multiple awards for his barbecue sauces and rubs as saucier for his family barbecue team, Ribbon Ain't Easy. As the son of an immigrant, he looks forward to arriving in Texas and tackling restrictive border policy. He considers himself fortunate to have had mentors, teachers, and parents who have taught him the centrality of relationships in his social work practice. Nate, please join us on the stage to be hooded and celebrated. Congratulations. I'd now like to introduce Bharathi Jayaram, Associate Director of Field Education at SSA, who will commence with the reading of the names of this year's graduates in our master's program. SSA faculty whose names are listed in your program will hood the graduates. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Melissa Louise Alvarez. Carrie Marie Anderson. Jessica B. Addis. Chloe Trueheart Bacon. Casey Barr. Aaron Berry. Nora Bergman. Jordan Berry. Amy Lee Black. Leah Michaela Bouchard. Jocelyn Breitman. Megan Rose Brookman. Thomas Lee Wilkinson Brown. Laura Ritzel Burt. Kay Taji Claiborne. Jennifer Marie Byman. Stephanie Campos. Kelly Ashley Chavez. Colton Dean Coffin. Jasmine Cooper. Brenda Copley. Hannah Ari Cornfield. Benjamin Coase. James Marshall Crow. Christine Cummings. Elizabeth Inger Dahl. Rebecca Dale. Pamela Dom. Daisy Day. Amy Elizabeth de la Fuente. Ellie Deal. Alexandra Dennis. Kristen Marie Dennis. Martha Diamond. Abraham Diaz. Amanda Lauren Diaz. Stephanie Rose Dominic. Wenqi Du. Tucker Eads. Sarah Rose Easton. Samantha Edwards. Danica Nicole Eilers. Nicole Marie Ellison. Jennifer Stephanie Escobar. Brianna Rose Espino. Tashika Eubanks. Chelly Fernandez. Allison Fischera. Nora Frazen. Lisa M. Free. Christine Freilich. Nora Angelica Garcia. Laura Joyce Geller. Jacqueline Goldman. Susie Gomez. Emily Goodburn. Nicole Grabowski. Amanda Nicole Graham. Isabel Gregerson. Monica Diane Grimes. Haley Gus. Ariel Hainline. Youngun Han. Shantae Monique Harrington. Janita Harris. Marshall Elijah Hatch, Jr. Emily Carl Hendricks. Vincent James Henneberg. Kristen Hernandez. Isabel Hickerson. Shelby Hines III. Karen K. Hayama. Deborah Ho. J. States Hobart. Shuyan Hong. Sophia Beth Horwich. Meijun Hu. Eva Hung. Deborah Wong. Amanda Hu. Bobby Jackson. Kenley Joy Johnston. Heather Jones. Hannah Khan. Samantha Ann Kemp. Catherine Laura Carol Kenny. Kaylin Verity Mackenzie Kibbe. Michaela Marie Kinderman. Brittany Michelle Kindle. Marcy Omer Kirchberg. Madison Elizabeth Knight. Lindsay Nicole Koenig. Anastasia Kumbas. Jae-hoon Lee. Soo-young Lee. Rebecca Sarah Levin. Danielle Paige Levy. Xiaomong Li. Courtney Margaret Loring. Samantha Lundy.
Ariel Mashke. Asha Mathai. Maye Montungulu. Abigail McGraw. Laura McInerney. Patrick McIntyre. Aaliyah Joan McKessie. Catherine McNulty. Cassandra Elena Mendoza. Derry Mian. Kayla Blair Mishler. Alejandro Monroy Velez. Samantha Louise Moog. Victoria Moreno. Maylee Mullen. Erin Kathleen Neal. Caleb Miles Nelson. Jessica Newton. Alex No. Kiva Cherie Nice Webb. Megan Novak. Athena Sophia Nungovich. Brandon Jeffrey O'Connor. Jesus Antonio Palafax Valdivinos. Margaret Palmer. Kushbu Ujit Patel. Bella Pusina. Brett Ryan Penner. Stephanie Corinne Perkowski. Melissa Petkovich. Veronica Helene Phillipsborn Suarez. Amy Phillips. Javier Ramirez. Brenda Marie Rivas. Jared Worthing Reynolds. Sonia Carolyn Rich. Saeed Richardson. Ruth Richmond. Anna Davis Rivkin. Paul Robinson. Ryan Rogalich. Hannah Boxerman Rosenbaum. Aviva Rosenberg. Chris Rosenthal. Blue. Samara Alexandra Rothstein. Margaret Grace Rubel. Clarissa St. George. Jess Salgado. Laura Beth Schirkenbach. Dana Elena Schraga. Megan Elizabeth Shade. Brittany Lee Sharon. Rachel Shine. Jessica Ann Smith. Leslie Nicole Smith. Victoria Gloria Smith Ellison. Rose Stoloff. Ru Yi Sun. Eric Swicky. Naomi Teichman Kaplan. Crystal Ann Sasha Thomas. Lauren Thompson. Karen Elizabeth Thor. Lydia Sarah Thornton. Megan Palmer Twible. Kara Ugolino. Maddox Clements Vickers. Ariel Larissa Von Hippel. Jessica Rose Wallace. Emily Weiser. Catherine Halpern West. Mallory Catherine Waddell. Olivia K. Wilkes. Erica Williams. Lucia Katarina Wilson. Hannah Elizabeth Wolf. Lu Yang. Zhishaojie Yang. Michael Yitriff. Samantha Allen Yo. Ewan Yu. Alice Haltmeyer-Urechko. Christy Zatvanitsky. Stephanie Zavala. Maria Zadunek. Sylvie Schwang. Jane Flatty. Daniel Gnidovic.
Don't you all look distinguished in your hoods? It's wonderful. Would you all please, one more time, welcome and recognize the Master's Class of 2017. It's now my great honor to announce the names of students who have earned the Doctor of Philosophy degree at SSA. These students have trained for and made significant contributions to academic discourse and scholarly research in the field of social work. Each of these students is being hooded by a faculty member of their dissertation committee. Teresa Anasti, who completed a dissertation entitled Sex Workers or Victim of Prostitution, Advocacy or Collaborations Among Nonprofits that Represent Individuals in the Sex Trade. Erin Banman, who completed a dissertation entitled organizational and worker level factors influencing father involvement and engagement in home visitation programs. Billy Joe Day, who completed a dissertation entitled A Multi-Level Analysis, Post-Secondary Enrollment by Rurality. Robert Daniel Eshman, who completed a dissertation entitled How the Internet Shapes Racial Discourse, Students of Color, Racism, and Resistance in Online Spaces. Tasha Seneca Keys, who completed a dissertation entitled A Mixed Method Approach to Understanding Factors that Promote Classroom Belonging and Engagement for High School Students. Nathaniel Ockpich, who completed a dissertation entitled Make or Break, College Going and College Leaving Among Foster Care Youth. And Christina Marie Ortiz, who completed a dissertation entitled An Exploration of Parental Racial Socialization in Dual Minority Multicultural Families. Would you please join me in congratulating the doctoral class of 2017. And now, before we close this ceremony, I'd like to ask all the graduates, masters and PhD, if you'd please stand, turn, face your guests, so that you and your guests may collectively congratulate and applaud you. And in return, let us, new graduates and social work colleagues all, take a moment to express our appreciation and gratitude for family and friends for the love and support that they provided to help us to reach this moment. Congratulations, graduates of 2017.